Lenovo is the latest company to release a handheld gaming PC with their Legion Go. It's got the potential to be a real game changer in the market, and we're going to do a quick unboxing, get the device set up, and play some games to give you some first impressions. Let's not delay this anymore. I'm itching to get this unboxed and set up, so get subscribed and let's get right to it. Before we even open the box, I have to say, the box itself is huge. I was actually a little bit concerned about how big the Legion Go is actually going to be. When we open the box, we've got some cardboard around a carrying case. I wasn't expecting a carrying case, so that's pretty awesome to see. The case actually has a pretty interesting design. It's branded with Legion on the front, but what's really cool about it is that it includes a small slot on the bottom, so you can charge the device while it's in the case, but keep it fully closed. This is a really unique approach, and I love that the Legion Go comes with a carrying case. Inside of the case is the actual device itself, but we'll come back to that. We've got a quick sheet for their 1-year limited warranty. On the side of the box is the charging cable. It's a 65-watt USB-C charger, and the wire is actually pretty long. Back to the Legion Go, first impressions are actually great. It feels really good to hold, even though it's a pretty large device, it doesn't feel super heavy in the hands. It's also got a pretty beefy kickstand, pretty much the same style as the Switch OLED. The kickstand is really stiff actually, so I don't have any concerns with it falling over or anything like that. Also inside of the case below the device is a base for mouse mode, which we'll take a closer look at in a bit. But overall, initial impressions before we turn on the device is kind of great. It's a big device, but it feels very balanced. Comparing the Legion Go to other devices, we've got the ASUS ROG Ally, which is quite a bit smaller and lighter. The Steam Deck is not as wide as the Legion Go, but ergonomically, they feel very similar. Comparing them a bit closer, the Steam Deck just feels like it's got a lot of empty plastic, but the Legion Go feels like they used every area of space they could. Compared to the One X Player 2, which features detachable controllers, the Legion Go is thinner and definitely more comfortable than the One X Player. One feature the One X Player 2 has that the Legion Go doesn't though is the controller bridge. I'm not a huge fan of playing with two halves of a controller that isn't connected. It just never feels like quite a comfortable experience. But on the other hand, I would imagine an attachable bridge accessory is easy enough for companies to create, or even 3D print one. The One X Player 2 puts the battery in the bridge itself, so the controllers when detached feel very, very light. Let's quickly talk about the Legion Go's specs and pricing. The device features an 8.8-inch QHD Plus screen. The screen can display up to 1600p, 144Hz refresh rate, and 500 nits of brightness. You can switch the device to a few different resolutions down to 800p, and you can toggle between 144Hz and 60Hz modes. The Legion Go uses the AMD Z1 Extreme, which features 8 cores and 16 threads. This is actually the same CPU we've seen from the ASUS ROG Ally. The Legion has 16GB of RAM, Wi-Fi 6E, and Bluetooth 5.3. The device features a 49.2 watt-hour battery which supports fast charging at 65 watts. The fast charging will get you from 0 to 70% in just 30 minutes. The Legion Go features two USB-C ports, one at the top of the device and one at the bottom. We've got our volume up and volume down buttons at the top of the device, along with the power button, headphone jack, and microSD card slot. Someone needs to create a dual-sided microSD card slot, because no matter what device I use, I never get the direction of the card right on the first try. It clicks in no problem once you get the direction of the card slot correct. Moving over to the controllers, there's a ton of tech and features in here. Firstly, as attached controllers, they have the standard buttons you would expect. On the left side of the device, we've got a shortcut key to quickly switch apps. The analog stick feels fantastic with an awesome range of motion. The only initial reaction I had is that the D-pad looks perfect, but when you actually use it, it just doesn't have a satisfying press. And the start and select buttons. On the right side of the device, we have a shortcut key to access the Legion Go quick settings panel, the ABXY buttons which feel really good, the right analog stick which feels just like the left one, and a touchpad. The touchpad feels really good. It's not quite Apple trackpad level, but it feels nice and smooth, and it really seems like it's going to make a huge difference when you have to navigate the jankiness of Windows. On the back of both controllers are additional macro buttons. Specific to the right controller are 2 additional side buttons for a left and right click, as well as a scroll wheel which will come in handy when we use more of the special features that these controllers offer. On the back of each controller is a switch you can toggle to detach the controllers. They partially slide off and come outward. It's not quite as seamless as a Joy-Con rail on the Switch, but it definitely works well enough. Once we detach the controllers, they're automatically connected to the Legion Go, so you can detach and continue playing pretty seamlessly. The real standout feature that sets the Legion Go apart though is the toggle on the bottom of the right controller. This toggle is for FPS mode. When you toggle FPS mode, you can attach the controller to the magnetic base, and then you have a pretty unique mouse. And while it feels slightly awkward at first, I think the controller actually feels well designed enough that after a few seconds, it feels really natural to use. Pricing-wise, the Legion Go comes in 2 models. The only difference between them is the storage capacity. The 512GB model is $699, and the 1TB model is $749. For $50 more for double the storage, it feels like a no-brainer to get the 1TB. Alright, let's get this thing turned on and set up. For some reason, the device wouldn't boot up right away for me. I had to plug it into power first, and then power it up, which is probably good practice anyways. I was a little disappointed that the Windows setup process was shown in landscape, which did seem to validate some concerns online that the display Lenovo used here is a portrait display. Later on in the setup, I realized the device rotation was enabled, so it was just rotating because it thought I was using the device in portrait mode. The Legion Go is unfortunately using a portrait display though. We can tell because in the Windows display settings, the device is listed as rotated for landscape flipped, which I've only seen required for portrait displays. This doesn't have any real meaningful impact to me, but I know that it has its own inherent downsides. Anyway, the device setup is the standard Windows 11 one, with the exception of the very last step. I noticed that the last few checkboxes you click through are Lenovo specific, and one mentions sharing your information with McAfee. Yuck. I disabled this one, but have no problem sharing anonymous data with companies to help improve the device and see metrics for device usage. When we get to the Windows desktop, the first thing I did is launch what I assume is the Lenovo launcher. It didn't auto-start, but it seemed to need an update first anyway. After that update, it actually wanted to update the firmware of the controllers as well. I let these 2 processes run, which took about 10 to 15 minutes total. After the launcher and firmware was updated, I did want to peek around the software a bit. The Legion launcher software seems to prioritize advertising games, albeit they're not terrible sales. It's a bit unfortunate you aren't launched directly into your library, but it's also not a huge deal, it's just 1 click away. Browsing through your games library is fairly standard, and the settings seem intuitive enough. When you browse through some of the settings, it's clear that Lenovo is trying to make it as simple as possible, but at the same time, some of the settings choices they've made make it a little bit more confusing and convoluted. For example, for performance toggles there's 2 of them, and it's not quite clear how they work together. And the only way to explicitly choose a TDP is by selecting Custom and setting that TDP. The other modes seem perfectly fine, but for testing it's a bit hard to know exactly what's going on. The shortcut key to get to the control panel also has some issues. It seems to randomly switch between opening a left panel and a right panel. The right panel is the one that I want, and the left panel, I'm just not quite sure what it is. All of the options on the left panel just open the Legion launcher. I'm sure these are settings that can be fixed on the software side though. One thing you actually really can't appreciate until you actually use it is having that trackpad on the right controller. It makes using Windows so much easier to navigate. You use it just like a regular trackpad, except to right click, you just press down for a little bit longer. You also have some haptics in the controller for some nice subtle feedback to let you know that you're actually interacting with the trackpad. The last thing I'll note before we jump into some games is that it doesn't seem like there are any driver updates available for the video graphics. I'm sure you can force the AMD updates to the latest versions, especially since they already exist for the ROG Ally, but as of now, they're pretty out of date. First up, we're going to check out some PC games. I think as a first impressions, it's really impressive. I started out with some Resident Evil 4. Since it was the first time I booted up a game, I had to get used to the TDP controls and figure out what they meant. I ended up changing some of the in-graphics settings too, just to find a good balance. The 1600p screen seemed a little overkill, so I did bump that down to 800p and prioritize graphics. This turned out great, and it felt like a good balance between considering battery life and getting a good looking gaming experience on this fantastic looking screen. The screen is super bright and vivid. Even though it's not an OLED, the colors feel like they pop just as much as an OLED. Next up, I tried FPS mode with Counter-Strike 2. It's surprisingly intuitive after just a few minutes of getting used to it. I never considered playing something like Counter-Strike on a handheld gaming PC, but this was such an eye-opening experience, and it's definitely something I see myself spending more time messing around with. Out of the box, Alan Wake 2 just simply won't boot. This isn't a problem specific to the Legion Go, it's just that Alan Wake 2 is an insanely demanding game. There are some workarounds, but out of the box, Alan Wake 2 is a no-go. Starfield needs that driver update that I mentioned before, but I saw a lot of potential before it crashed, so I definitely plan on doing some more testing here once there's some driver updates available. Spider-Man Miles Morales also gave me a notification about outdated drivers, but the game actually ran great. I messed around with different TDP and graphical settings and found that 18 watts high graphics at 800p was a really awesome balance and looked absolutely great. Older retro games are going to be no issue whatsoever on the Legion Go. I would also anticipate some pretty great battery life since we can limit the TDP to be as low as 5 watts. But for today, we're going to focus on higher end systems. GameCube was great on the Legion Go. I was able to run Mario Kart Double Dash at 8 watts TDP and upscale to 1080p resolution. At 8 watts, F-Zero at 1080p with widescreen hacks was awesome. There were a few dips to like 58 or 59 frames per second, but I don't really consider that an issue. And of course, you can bump up your TDP a bit and get that constant 60. Burnout 3 at 1080p with widescreen hacks on PlayStation 2 is also a ton of fun. I was unsure how much power the Wii U would need, so I set it to 18 watts and got pretty stable 60 frames per second from Breath of the Wild. Later on, I adjusted the TDP down to 10 watts and I was getting between 30 and 45 FPS, which I consider pretty great, especially for optimal battery life. Switch was another easy system for the Legion Go to emulate. Super Mario 3D World ran no problems whatsoever at full speed. Lastly, Xbox 360 emulation seemed to run well enough. I feel like the FPS counter wasn't quite right though. Sometimes the game felt like it was running full speed even though the overlay showed it slower, but other times it would show full speed and it would feel like it's running it like a slideshow. It really comes down to your TDP settings for 360 emulation. You can set it to 30 watts and get Red Dead Redemption to run great, but that's only if you want to get 40 minutes of gameplay from your battery. The balance I found was to run the game at 20 watts, which felt pretty good and had a mostly stable frame rate. So my first impressions of the Legion Go are actually awesome. I think that while the Legion Go isn't offering any more power than a device like the ASUS ROG Ally, it's got some really great features. The detachable controllers open up the ability for some pretty cool bridge accessories. The FPS mode on the controller makes Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, or maybe even Valorant a real option to play on the Legion Go. The 144Hz 1600p screen is certainly overkill, but the high quality screen shines with its nice peak brightness and colors that really pop. Game performance is pretty great, but we do need those driver updates to take full advantage of its capabilities. Any gripes I have on the software side are just the standard Windows jankiness I usually complain about. There also are some bugs from the Legion Go launcher, like the instability of showing that right quick settings panel. While it's not guaranteed, I would think the launcher issues are something that Lenovo will address sooner than later. Emulation is awesome though, and games look great, especially when you upscale them. It's a big device, but it's not really all that much bigger than the Steam Deck. I would even go as far as saying that I'm finding it more comfortable to hold than the Steam Deck. It's larger, but you get a bigger screen and I think a bit more of an ergonomic experience. So far, from just about a day and a half of testing, I'm really excited for this device to find its way to people. Sometimes I dread putting more time into a device for a full review, but I can say that that is certainly not the case here. I'll be back in a few weeks with a full in-depth review of the Legion Go. So until then, let me know down in the comments what you want tested on the Legion Go. Any PC games? Any emulation? If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss other videos and that full review. And thanks for watching.